What's up, everyone, and welcome to Beer Breakdown, where we dig into the stories behind some of our favorite beers with the brewers that brew them. My name is Gary, founder of Hopped LA, and today I am talking to John Garcia, head brewer at King Harbor Brewing Company in Redondo Beach, California. Today we're drinking a couple really special and interesting beers. Both of them are part of their 7th anniversary release mixed 4-pack. That had a hazy double IPA, a Munich-style Dunkel that was a collab with Naughty Pine Brewing. And then the two beers we drank, one was Foray. It's a cold IPA hopped with Raquel, Citra, and Idaho 7. A trendy style, an up-and-coming style you don't see too often, a controversial style, I think, in a lot of circles. So whether you know cold IPA or you don't, it's really interesting talking through this beer with John, how he approached it, and how he thinks it came out. And spoiler alert, it's delicious, really, really good. And then also the crown jewel of the 4-pack, their anniversary release. This is French Toast Latte, a dessert style stout with cinnamon, Madagascar vanilla, Nicaraguan coffee, maple syrup, and lactose, sitting at 9%, a collab with one of their local coffee shops, HiFi Espresso. What's really interesting about this beer is not just what it tastes like, and it's completely delicious, but really the path that John took to get to this beer. I mean, he started homebrewing maybe 5-6 years ago, and then really put himself in a position to succeed, starting new projects, getting himself in positions where he could take advantage of opportunities to jump into the industry, jump in to help establish breweries, and then work his way up to really where he is today. I mean, he even was a part of one of the early Los Angeles craft beer podcasts, paving the way to what you're listening to right now. So I really appreciate his journey. I think it's super inspiring, and it really sets the foundation for the beers that we drank tonight, what they're all about, and kind of where King Harbor is going with him at the helm. So I really hope you guys enjoy this story. And as always, this podcast pairs perfectly with the beers themselves. So press pause. I won't be offended. And go to King Harbor if you're listening to this podcast in October and maybe the early November. These beers are probably still available at their tap room. It's the French Toast Latte and the Foray Cold IPA. So pick these up and then fire up the podcast and drink them along with us. The beers and the podcast go down so much better when you do. But first, a quick word from our sponsor, Hi-Lo Liquor. Hi-Lo has the best beer selection in the LA area, hands down. They bring in some of the best beers from local LA breweries, from breweries throughout Southern California and throughout the state. They also bring in a lot of really cool stuff throughout the country and internationally. Honestly, Hi-Lo has beers that you will not see anywhere else. I guarantee that. I recommend Hi-Lo to everybody. They have a store in Culver City, and they also have a store in Long Beach. Both of them are amazing. They bring in food trucks. You can pick up some food, pick up some beers. The Long Beach location has their tap room open, and they do like special curated flights on Friday nights. It's really a thing that you have to check out. So hit up Hi-Lo. You can go to hiloliquor.com, place an order, get it delivered to you throughout the LA area or most of the LA area. They also do shipping throughout California, but honestly, the in-person experience is really where it's at. So even if it's like a 30-minute drive, I think once in a while it's worth heading down to Culver or Long Beach, whatever's closest to you, and going and checking out Hi-Lo in person. Awesome staff that will recommend cool stuff to you and guide you in the right direction depending on what you like. Hi-Lo is unmatched in LA, and we're so lucky to have them as a sponsor. So please check out Hi-Lo, support us, support them. Hi-Lo, drink well. Thanks for joining today, man. I appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, we had like scheduling around the Dodgers playoffs, man. I mean, it's a difficult thing.
Yeah, no, I understand.
I was like, when we were rescheduling, I was like, if the Dodgers win the next two games, we might be looking at having to reschedule again on Tuesday. So,
Yeah.
I mean, I'm sad they lost, but I'm also glad we were able to make this happen now.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. Yeah, I saw your story right when I was trying to log in, and I saw you had the Dunkel as well, so I had to run and grab that. And then
I just got to be prepared. You
right.
You never know where it's gonna go. There's all three of these, or all four of the beers that you sent. Well, you sent more than four, but the four from the anniversary pack. I just love the diversity in that. Like, I love like where you guys went with that, and it's just, you get a little bit of something different. And I myself don't have your beers all too often. And so being able to get a look at like a little bit of what you can do in different styles is pretty neat. So thanks for sending that out.
Yeah, no problem. Yeah, it was all for the anniversary, and we wanted to go all out for it, and we're sad that we ended up postponing it, but the beer was still on its way. So yeah, it was just a good opportunity to kind of just show what we like and what we wanted to brew.
So I want to get into the beers, but before I do, maybe for anyone that hasn't heard of King Harbor, like, what are you guys all about? What's King Harbor Brewing Company?
I think at the very beginning they wanted it to be beer for the beach. We're so close to the beach. I mean, our name King Harbor is just kind of paying homage to that whole kind of lifestyle. And but as the years have gone on, I don't know. That's what I'm trying to figure out now that I've kind of stepped in. Mm-hmm. I've been with the company, 4 years. So it feels a lot longer than that, actually. But yeah, I don't know. That is a good question that I probably need to figure out on my own. But we're trying to keep the core things consistent and keep the quality up, but also I am really trying to reach out to other people in the industry, just and craft beer fans, to kind of let them know that we're still here and we're trying to change things up and make things a little exciting again. Good example for the mixed 4-pack that I sent you. You're doing a Dunkel all the way to a Dessert Stout and a bunch of things in between. So
yeah. So King Harbor, I guess the namesake, and I learned this after you guys opened, is the Redondo Beach harbor. So I even though I was born and raised in Los Angeles, I am not a South Bay guy. So I didn't even really know about that. So you guys have 3 locations in Redondo mm-hmm. Beach. So essentially you're Redondo Beach's brewery, but the beer goes much further beyond that. Is there anything on your guys's list that would be considered a core brand? I know like King Harbor IPA back in the day was like a big one for you guys, and there was a few others. But these days, what does it look like from like a, I don't know, core or flagship, or is there anything that kind of sits there?
Yeah. Tiki Hot IPA, we call it a tropical IPA, was made a few years ago, and that, to be honest, kind of helped us get through the hard parts of the pandemic and all the shutdowns and everything. So that beer really kind of saved us. So Tiki Hot IPA would be one of our flagships. Followed closely behind, following it would be a Guava Lava, which is a Goza style tart ale with guava, and then as we've seen over the past year, to round out kind of like a top 4, surprisingly, would be lagers. So our top side German style pils, which you've had, and then a little bit newer to the stage would be our Redondo Special, which is a Cerveza style lager.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, so those top 4 I would say are usually pretty consistent these days.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So, you mentioned, just a lot of change. I feel like, you're coming in, you're talking about evolution, you're talking about showing who we are now. You've been with the company a few years now, and your role there has evolved, which we'll get into. But let's rewind. Like,
Okay.
when did you first start getting into beer, and like, what did that look like?
So I somewhat prepared because I figured that question would come, and I don't know if I've ever answered it. I will say this is my first time on a podcast that I wasn't hosting or co-hosting. So first of all, thank you.
Yeah.
And I'm sorry. So even though I've got this graying beard, the gray is coming from my 3-year-old, not really too much from age. I turned 21 in like beginning of or end of like 2008, 2009. So when I started really getting into craft beer, I was extremely lucky. You know, I don't have the Sierra Nevada story that most brewers that I kind of look up to have. I actually have you know, a Monkish and a Strand and an El Segundo and a Smog City story. So those were actually some of the first beers that I had tried that weren't, you know, the more of the macro things. Went to school locally at Cal State Dominguez Hills, and actually one of Monkish's, I don't know if he's a tasting room manager, but Jairo used to manage the sports bar on campus. So he probably gave me one of my first legal drinks. It was most likely some kind of a German wheat beer. And then actually had a studio teacher that started getting us into cigars and craft beer. So we would go and have class, and there was a balcony in our building where we would have cigars, and people would bring like Stone and Ballast Point, and just went to like a local restaurant, asked what they had on tap. They said they had this Belgian style beer that was local, and they were going to be opening up a spot soon to the public or something along those lines. And it turned out to be a Monkish beer. So I had a Monkish beer, beer from the dudes, and everything like pretty close together. And so that was really my introduction to beer. So I got pretty lucky.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. And for anyone that doesn't know, your Instagram name is South Bay Brew John, right?
Yeah.
And
used to be South Bay Brew Talk.
Right. The podcast, right?
Yeah, I started a podcast maybe like 2016 as a way to get my foot into the local craft beer scene. My plan was to make friends with bottle shop owners, employees, bartenders, anyone, and then try to just interview everybody, and hopefully one of them would let me know that they had a job opening for washing kegs or something. And it kind of worked. So Craft Beer Cellar in Torrance, they're closed now. I don't know how familiar you are with them.
Yeah.
But the owner there, Brent, and one of his employees are actually vital to my craft beer like knowledge and history. They just turned me on to every single beer that you could imagine. Really like opened my eyes to what craft beer could be and how broad it is. Got obsessed, and then had a cousin now, cousin by marriage. They're very competitive family. My wife's family, they're Argentine and Croatian. I don't know if that has anything to do with it, but in my experience, they're very competitive. And he's like, we were both into craft beer, and he said that we should both take up home brewing, and then in a couple months have a competition, see who does better. And I was the only one that did it.
Oh, wow.
He never picked it up. Yeah, started home brewing. Pretty much got obsessed with it.
Yeah. I think it's really cool. Like, you're talking about how you're getting into beer originally, and some of these like, you know, local South Bay early craft beer pioneers here in LA. And, you know, your podcast, if that like South Bay focus, and I feel like you're the South Bay guy. And I remember hearing about the podcast when, you know, we were in the early days of Hopped LA, and I was like, all right, we're up in the valley. Like, we got this. And like, there's these guys in the South Bay that are doing something cool. So it was cool to see that. And I'm assuming you're like born and raised in the South Bay somewhere out there.
Pretty much, yeah. I've lived in Torrance most of my life. So yeah, didn't move away to college or anything like that. Don't know what the future holds, but I don't think I can open up a brewery in Torrance. There's quite a few in the area, but
Yeah.
I mean, it's kind of hard to beat. But yeah, I've been here pretty much all my life.
So you're getting into craft. You're trying those early breweries, and you said 2016 you started up the podcast. Was the home brewing thing before that, or was it like after you started podcasting, or where did that come into play?
It was before. Probably brewed my first batch like 2014, 2015, and like really what kind of was the turning point was got married in 2015, went to Thailand for honeymoon. Fell off what do you call it, I guess a moped, and messed up my elbow, like dislocated my elbow in Thailand. So when I came back, I wasn't able to work at my job at the time. I was doing like media transfer, so I was taking old 16 millimeter and 8 millimeter film and digitizing it, restoring it, and stuff like that. And I love the people I worked with, but I just hated that job. Like, spend 2 hours on the freeway every day and another 9 hours at this job. And I hated it. So when I came back and I couldn't work for maybe 2 months. And then I went back part-time because my arm was like in this Iron Man type of, cast, and I couldn't use it for a couple months. I had time to kind of, think about what I wanted to do. And I knew that if I went back to that job full time, like they were trying to make me manager of a new store, and I'd be there probably now. So at that time, Scholb was gearing up to open, and they are really close to where I live. I live pretty close to the Scholb Absolution area. And so I'd go there once a week and talk to Patrick and Jason and all of them, like just asking, like, can I come in and wash kegs? Can I come in and just shadow you? When you're ready to hire someone, can I be that person? And like they hustled for a couple years. I think they did everything. The 2 couples, there was 4 of them. They just did everything. Unfortunately, just wasn't able to find a spot there. But then Zymergy Brewworks in Torrance, down Hawthorne, was opening up. So did the same thing, went over there, and I'm like, hey, I just want a job in the beer industry. I'll clean kegs or whatever you want me to do. And ended up getting a job there. So that was like my first official like industry gig. And the podcast had already like started ramping up slowly at that time.
That's cool. So the plan kind of worked, right? Like the podcast got you talking to people, got you knowing about these places that were opening up or on the verge of opening up, and building those relationships early. And it's so cool that you landed at Zymergy, just such a unique spot. Like tell us a little bit about that concept. RIP, I feel like that concept is such a cool thing to have for people for just this specific reason. For getting people like deeper in the brewing industry, and I don't think we have anything like that right now, kind of. So yeah, what's Zymergy?
So it was an extremely small place in Torrance that was like a DIY brew spot. So I know there was a few places. There was a place in Redondo that closed years ago that kind of did the same thing. I know there was a place in like Orange County somewhere. But you make an appointment, you tell us what you want to brew, and we brewed it for you. If you just wanted to learn, or if it was for a party or whatever. And the cool thing is that we were all grain brewing, so we weren't doing extract brewing like some of the other spots where I think where it fell short was there was really no fermentation, like temperature control. It was like a big closet where you had all these like plastic fermenters going off and like a little AC. And so even if the AC was set to 68, like that's not controlling the inside of a carboy. So I'm sure a lot of those things got over 90 degrees easy. But yeah, people would come in and it was a lot of fun. I was really hoping to, learn from another brewer there, but it turned out like I was one of the brewers out of like 3 other ones. So it was an incredible learning experience, and I don't think there'd be any way that I could have brewed over 300 recipes in like a year's time, which is what I ended up doing there.
Yeah, I mean, essentially,
So
like it's like a time machine for your brewing career, for your brewing experience. Like, I mean, you started there what 2016, and how long had you been seriously homebrewing for? A few years, 2 years.
well, yeah, 2016 I started there, so I was brewing for maybe a year and a half,
Yeah,
but not to that level. It was maybe a couple brews every couple months, and yeah, when I got there, it was just all grain brewing, like 4 to 6 batches a week. Some because we had a tap room there, so we were able to serve beer, but then we'd get appointments that would come in. Sometimes I do 2 or 3 on a Saturday. So it was pretty intense to teach people about ingredients and how to brew beer and all the steps, cleaning up after brewing, which is exhausting, serving beer, and then also cleaning up, from the tasting room side of it. So yeah, it really geared me up for how crazy an actual, like a full size brewery could get.
yeah, and just the number of batches and different styles that you're doing and different recipes. Is there anything that you were building back in that day that like has inspired anything you're doing today, or is it all just kind of like a different league?
It's I would say it's a different league, but I was able to get pretty intimate with different ingredients and really just build this catalog of grain I liked, yeast. Like I don't know, I use so many different strains of yeast, and just all styles of beer, because you get someone that come in and most often than not we were brewing like a Pliny clone, an
Right.
Allagash White clone, an El Segundo beer clone, so that was the majority of the thing. But then you get people that come in and they're like, I want a cinnamon pumpkin latte, whatever, blah, 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 blah. And like, well, if you're paying for those extra ingredients, like, challenge accepted.
Right.
But yeah, so I gathered a good catalog of ingredients and what I liked and percentages I like to use them in. I think that I really try to nail down like dessert stout recipes over there. And then I used hibiscus a lot.
Really?
That's where, yeah, I just abused it in every way that you could imagine. And it's actually really carried over to a lot of like the King Harbor beers, whether it's just for color, whether it's to add acidity, whether it's for the, the flavors that you can get at different amounts. Hibiscus is pretty magical. I have to stop using it now because we have enough pink beer, I think, for a little while. But yeah, so yeah, just the ingredients alone of being able to use everything and kind of just making mental notes of it.
Is there a cost thing to the hibiscus too? Like, is it cheap?
It's not that expensive. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I can't tell you off the top of my head, but like a pound through like the supplier we use is, I don't know, like $6, $5. It's not crazy.
Right.
And a little goes a long way. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Interesting. So the podcast, I think
Yeah.
that was, I feel like right now, this is the first episode I've done where the guest has like probably better sound than I do. So I was a little bit intimidated for that. But
no.
but yeah, tell me about the
Overkill.
podcast. Like, I mean, 2016, interesting time for beer. I think it's probably the best time to start a podcast just because of everything that was going on during that time.
Yeah.
But yeah, tell me like the idea, the conception, like how did that all go? Like where did it take you?
Yeah. Like I'd be lying if lying to myself if I said I was a great host. So I knew I needed help. I mean, I really like the behind the scenes thing, which is why I prefer being a brewer than a bartender. I like hiding in the back. So I had Brent from Craft Beer Cellar and one of his employees at the time, Brian. And like I said, they just had a great knowledge of beer. And at the time they were both studying for, not the like beer server level of Cicerone, but the next
The regular
one up,
one, yeah.
the one where it counts. And I just thought that was fascinating. They were just talking about beers I had never heard of, styles I had never even thought could like exist. And so they were my co-hosts, and we would do it here in my office here at the house. And the idea was to interview anyone in the industry that we could, like we interviewed, I'm sure like a good bunch of people know, like I called him Punk Rock Josh. He was a beer tender at Smog City for the longest time. You couldn't miss him. He usually had like neon mohawk. And we got a few brewers. We did have Patrick Scholes originally from Scholb, and actually Phil McDaniel, who was the original head brewer for King Harbor, was one of our first 3 guests. And we just wanted to talk to anybody we could in the industry and then explore different styles. So we would do episodes like Battle of the Quads, and we would have like 4 or 5 quads, and we would just do blind taste testing. And those guys got their hands on amazing things like West Valletta and 12, which is one of my top beers ever. And he had them, like, he was a crazy beer hoarder, and he would just have like an 8-year-old Westie 12, a 12-year-old, the freshest one he could get. And then we would do a cellared versus fresh Westie battle. We would do Battle of the Double IPAs, where I remember that we had a Three Weavers beer paired up with Pliny, and we all chose Three Weavers in a blind tasting, and that stuff was amazing. So that was the thing. It was really just for me to learn and explore everything about beer that we could, and share it. And if people, wanted to listen to it, that's cool. I mean, when I listen back, it's a little like cringy, I don't like, I think we deleted everything now because it's been a couple years since we've done anything. But I mean, it was a lot of fun, and it did what it was intended to do, was to like really get a foothold in the industry and just kind of go from there.
Yeah, that's awesome. I love that. I mean, obviously, beer podcasting near and dear to my heart, just beer media in general. I'm just super interested in everything beer media, which is funny because I have these conversations with a lot of people, and it's like, most people just want to drink the beer, or they want to brew the beer, or they want to sell the beer. And I'm kind of like, I just want to talk about it and just like see what other people's perspectives are. When you look back
I love listening to it. I still listen to podcasts all day long, yours included. I think towards the end, when we weren't doing the podcast as much, I may have approached you at like a Celador anniversary and asked if you were interested in doing the podcast. You or someone else that was like at a tent you guys had. And like, I wanted to get you on the podcast, Hopped LA. I mean, I've seen it in every beer festival, and then we just kind of stopped doing it.
So why did it stop?
Well, one of the guys moved. He was living here in like the South Bay area. He was originally from Chicago. And if anyone listened to the podcast, he mentioned that like 5 times an episode, as Chicago people tend to do.
Right.
And then he moved to San Diego to work for Cellar 3. And so it got a little difficult. I think we lost a little magic doing it, not in person, the 3 of us, to like play off of each other, which was, I think, the most interesting part of it. And then he just kept moving farther away, and then time differences became a factor. And then, I ended up getting a job at King Harbor, and just took a lot of extra time from me. Yeah. And as you know, this is a full-time job almost. Setting it up, editing, doing all the everything,
it's a lot.
Marketing. I hope you have help. If not, like, everyone subscribe or do whatever you can to pay this man.
It's definitely a lot of work. I mean, I feel like it's it's one of those things that, it's a fun thing to think about, like, oh, beer podcast, that sounds great. Beer blog, that sounds awesome. Beer review videos, that's great. Like a weekly newsletter, like all the things that we're trying to do. And it's like each one of those things could be like a single person's full-time job. 100%. So I'm doing like all of those things, like very at bare minimum. But yeah, when you look back on your podcast, like, is there anything, do you miss it? Like, is there anything you like feel nostalgic about, or is there anything that you like feel like, oh, if I did that today, I'd do it differently? Or do you ever see yourself doing one again?
Oh yeah, the whole like looking back and wanting to do things differently, that's everything. That's music, podcast, beer recipes, that's everything for me. I mean, I do miss hanging out with those fine gentlemen and just having a good excuse to talk to people in the industry. You know, like early on, I like, you know, sought after everyone that I like. You know, we had Henry from Monkish. Like we were so close, I think, to doing something, and then like I got busy, and then they got even more busy, and you know, like just I do miss the having a reason to just. It's kind of weird, right? Like you meet another brewer, and you're like, you want to go and just talk for an hour for no real reason. But if you say it's for a podcast, and it's a little easier to approach them, and then I do miss. Guests and the other co-hosts just like challenging my palate, because, you know, a good example is like I just haven't been in the mood for Belgian beer in a couple of years, you know, and I used to love it. It used to be the only beer that I drank. But if I was doing the podcast, I know that they would, did you try this? Have you tried that? Let's do a comparison, and it would just keep my palate alive a little bit more, you know?
Yeah.
So yeah, I kind of missed that, and just like the hanging out, especially the last 18 months or whatever it's been. Even doing that through Zoom probably would have been a lot of fun.
Yeah, it's
still miss all that extra work though.
back when you guys were doing it, like there wasn't really. I mean, there's not a ton going on now from like a beer podcast perspective, like LA beer. But back then, I mean, you guys were probably one of the only ones doing it, at least consistently. I know there was like a Long Beach one, and I think that was it. Like, I don't really remember too much else out there. So yeah, I mean, being early to the game and being in that space, I'm kind of jealous that I wasn't doing one back then, because it seems like a fun time. I mean, now podcasts are a little bit more mainstream. So when you ask a brewer to be on a podcast, like they get it instantly. And I think people are a little more willing to do it. But yeah, I mean, I think doing it back in those days would have been pretty fun too. What do you think? What do you think's a good recipe for a beer podcast? You know, there's like so many different formats.
Yeah, I think deciding on your format is probably the first thing you want to do, right? Because you could be like an NPR type of thing where it's super edited and produced, which is cool in its own way. Or you could be, you know, like the more like the loose conversation podcast, which is kind of what we wanted to do, and we had like points of where we try to steer the podcast, but there are a few times where we just like someone picked up a 4-pack and we just drank and talked about whatever. And for some reason at that time, I think you're right, there was a lot going on. There were just acquisitions here, and this person like selling here, this one going out of business, this person, you know, doing whatever. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, if we didn't have a successful podcast, so I don't think I have a good recipe for it. But yeah, either like a good team to really help you if you're going like the extra production route, or just like a good energy for a single person, or like I think our strong suit again was that we were playing off of each other really well. Yeah, because I get in my head a lot, and then especially, you know, I'm listening to the quality of the audio. We didn't do video, so I might be focusing on, okay, I got to bring that level up, or that the low end on there, like his voice is too much, and then they're like, well, what do you think about the beer? I'm like, what are you talking about? You know, they would go off on their own. So it kind of worked that there were 3 of us with completely different personalities. So that was fun, and I liked the whole conversation thing. I just, if it ended up being like a 3-hour podcast, I may chop it up. I wasn't too like, let's keep this at 45 minutes or something. Let's just have fun, and if people don't want to listen, it's not really. It's costing us a couple bucks a month to upload it to, you know, whatever, to stream everywhere, but it wasn't that big of a deal. So it was more of like, I mean, like anything, right? Like just love what you do and it'll show. Yeah. I guess that would be my easy recipe.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's cool. Well, I mean, I got to tip my cap to you for like paving the way a little bit for people like myself, and helping, I guess, to hopefully continue the conversation in audio form around beer, like in this like local focus, because I think there's a lot to talk about.
Yeah, I think that's really important, like what you guys are doing, and I don't know how big your team is. I hope it's more than just you, so you're not exhausted. Because I know you have a new, like not a newborn, but pretty fresh kid, right? That's exhausting in its own right.
Yeah. I mean, there's I got a little help.
Yeah. There's a lot of beer podcasts that I love listening to, and I'll just download them weekly as they come out. And I think it's really important for for learning as a brewer, someone that's in the industry. I mean, even going as in the direction of like the social movements, the way people we're behaving now. And yeah, I think it's great. It's like, it's our news, it's everything. It's our education. So I'm a huge proponent of podcasts. I'm always, just parroting what I hear and yeah. And then as we get into one of the beers that's I'm sure we'll get into, I'll explain my reasons for doing a beer some way when I've heard it this way on a podcast. So yeah,
I think that's the part about this specific format that I really like, is that I get to dig into to learn more about a beer in a way that I don't typically get to, and I think a lot of people don't typically get to. And I'm trying to like skirt that line of like technicality and process and some of those things that I kind of get, but I'm not a brewer, so I'm not there. But yeah, just trying to make it a little bit more approachable and help people understand that there's something behind this, and you don't have to get it all, but like if you get little parts of it, it makes it more interesting, the entire experience. So cool. Yeah. Well, we have a couple beers I want to crack open. So the first one,
I'll follow your lead.
That I want to do, and is from your anniversary 4-pack. It's the Cold IPA, and I think this is just, I mean, this is the trend. This is the trend. We're not seeing it in LA, which is why I think it's so interesting. There's only a handful of breweries that I feel like have put out a Cold IPA, and I don't think a lot of people understand what it is, and I think there's like some misconceptions around it. So I'd love to just taste this with you and hear more about like what you did with it and what you think about it.
To be fair, I don't think there's a lot of brewers that really know what it is. So.
I know, right?
And I'm one of them.
Well, you can give me like the baseline of what you do know, and I think more like the takeaway after brewing this, like what your thoughts are. So this is called Foray Cold IPA, Raquel, Citra, and Idaho 7. I have a feeling this is probably no longer available at the tap room, right?
There's a little bit left. Yeah, I think there's still some kegs and maybe some cans left, actually.
Cool.
Yeah, that'll be my closing statement about the slow season. So we'll get to that soon. But yeah.
So I guess kick it off. Like, what is a cold IPA? Like, let us know.
All IPAs are cold is what we're hearing in the tasting rooms. So yeah, foray. I mean, it's we're making it very clear that our entire staff is completely obsessed with golf. My brother and I picked it up in the beginning of the pandemic as a way to spend time with our dad, and we left him behind. We've gotten obsessed with it. So actually on the front of our can is one of our taproom workers, and overall just like MVP of the brewery. He does everything. He stocks all the tasting rooms. He just kind of takes care of everything that has to do with draft. And so shout out to James with his Dodger hat everywhere he goes now. But yeah, cold IPA. So I think one of the first ones I had was actually from Green Cheek.
Okay.
Which I loved, really good. So really my inspiration was Timbo Pils from Highland Park, which isn't a cold IPA, but I think they call it a hoppy Pils or a West Coast Pils, something along those lines.
Yeah,
right?
I think it's West Coast Pils, yeah.
Yeah, so I've wanted to brew something like that for a long time. And then when I saw this and had to figure out what beers we wanted to do for the anniversary, I think it fit in perfectly. So listening to podcasts, I think Wavefinder Brewing in maybe Portland, I could be wrong, sorry.
Yeah.
I think they might be credited with kind of starting this trend.
Mm-hmm.
So if you listen to him, he does cereal mashing, which we can't do. And he uses a good amount of corn or rice, which I didn't want to do. Mm-hmm. I think he's adamant that it's not just a rebrand on IPL, but I might be leaning a little bit more in that direction, to be honest. I think it's a more palatable term for consumers, even though there's still some education that we have to do when people see the word cold IPA. But, it's not a secret that if you put IPA behind something, it's a little more approachable. So really for us, it's the alcohol of the ABV of an IPA, which is, this one's about 7, hopped the way we would an IPA. But we do use lager yeast. We use our house lager yeast, and we do ferment it like our lagers. So I think Wayfinder also ferments lager yeast, but warm, which again, I didn't want to do. And I think it's a new enough style that everyone's gonna have their own take on it. And I think no matter how you get there, if you come across with kind of the same thing like that's what I've really learned with everything, with music, with podcasts, with beer especially. There's a million ways to do one thing, and I think if we all kind of get to that same thing. So this is like more of, I wanted to be reminded of Timbo Pills and the beer I had at Green Cheek. So that was my goal.
Yeah, hoppy lager, bumped up ABV.
Yeah, and then using the lager yeast and fermenting it cold and actually lagering it. This is like a 6-7 week beer. So it had its time in the tank. I think just everything really just gets out of the way and just really makes room for the hops, which is kind of the intention.
Totally. Yeah, I mean, incredibly aromatic. So did you dry hop with those 3 hops as well?
Yeah, those 3 hops on the hot side and the cold side.
Got it. I mean, I think you accomplish what you're trying to accomplish here, is that it's kind of like a raw hop experience, like there's you don't have those like fruity esters from that ale yeast. And so it's just like crisp, it's clean, and then it's just hops just screaming at you. Very tropical, really nice citrus, like candy citrus. It's really cool.
Yeah. Has a little like of a dank backbone to it. Like, yeah. I mean, and then again, the idea was to have like a perfect golfing beer, and I think we've proven that a few times in the last few tea times that we've had. We've taken this beer out, and it hits the spot.
Yeah, and from on the hot side, hop additions being later, I mean, it's not super bitter, so I'm assuming that you went more on the late side.
Yeah, I'm becoming a fan of adding like 60-minute hops even to stuff that's not incredibly bitter. Like most of our hazies now will have a bittering addition, because I'm just not a fan of overly sweet beers. Excuse me, especially with in the hazy category. So I do find myself increasing that a little bit, but to get more hop punch without any extra bitterness, I've also become a fan of like colder whirlpooling. Yeah. So we do that pretty often. So this one was no exception. I believe we did this one at it was like a 190 whirlpool. We can get a nice hop punch in there.
And so explain that a little bit. So hop addition in a cold whirlpool as opposed to hotter, what does that allow you to do?
So it's just the hops aren't isomerizing as much as they would. So I mean, normally whirlpools would just be, your boil's done, you kick off your heat source, and you start to spin it, and you pretty much throw your hops in. So we do that. We still do that with like Tiki Hot and Catalina and some more of our older school beers. But instead, what we're doing for this and some of the newer IPAs is we're shutting off our heat source. We're doing a whirlpool to pretty much just settle everything that's in the kettle, sending it through our heat exchanger to cool it down to a temperature we're looking for. I've played with 170 to like 195. I'm still kind of, collecting all my data on what does what and what I like. And then once it hits that target, then we'll go ahead and spin it again without going through our heat X, because we'll clog it, and then we'll add our hops and then kind of proceed as normal from there. So instead of spinning it at like a 212 or whatever, 210, we're bringing it down to 195 or 180 or something like that.
Yeah, so essentially the concept is adding hop flavor and aroma at that like early stage, but not extracting the bitterness as much from those.
Right. Yeah, I think you're still getting a little, because in beers that we're not doing a 60-minute edition, and even if we're doing a 180 whirlpool, like there's still something there, and probably getting some from dry hop as well. But yeah, and then when they don't the hops don't isomerize, I think whatever's going into the kettle is gonna allow for like the whole biotransformation stuff as well.
Right.
You'll have more stuff that'll survive going into the fermenter. But really, it's just to increase the hops in our kettle without getting an overwhelming bitterness.
Mm-hmm. So, what's the takeaway for this beer? Is it did it get where you wanted it to go? And do you see yourself doing more stuff like this?
Yeah, I think so. It's been received really well. I try to keep communications open with taproom servers and kind of see how our beers are being taken by customers that come in. And I think this one has gone really well. I know they had some education to do because it's a new term, that's being thrown around. Mm-hmm. And we have a few taproom workers that I think have their whole little spiel down perfectly. That's why they're great at what they do. And I don't think I could necessarily be a good taproom worker, because I would just start blathering on and people would just nod off, or just back away slowly and not buy anything. I mean, there's always stuff I would change. I do like, for the very first one, not knowing how, lagering a beer and when we're going to dry hop it and all these random questions that I never had to really consider for a recipe. I think we're at a really good start. But that's kind of my personality anyway. Even if I really loved this, I probably still have a few notes for the next time. So then the question is, do we brew the same one with the same hops, or do we change it up, keep it interesting? But yeah, this is one of the first beers since I've been head brewer over at King Harbor that improvements didn't jump at me right away. Usually I'm like, okay, let's fix that. Let's do that. We'll change that by 1% or 2%. And this is the first time where I've had to sit with it and what don't I like about this beer?
Yeah. No, it's really good. And I think you did a great job with it. And I think the thing that keeps sticking in my mind as I drink it is that it gives you that full flavor of an IPA, but it doesn't linger on your palate. It washes away really, really cleanly, even compared to some other cold IPA, hoppy lager type of stuff that I've had. It just prepares you for the next sip. So as you were saying, the golfing beer, this isn't the type of beer that I personally bring to golf, but I see where you're going with that. And it's an easy drinker for people that want that really big, full hop experience. It's really cool. And I think this beer, it's an interesting style that I think you can play with, whether it's, bringing back the recipe intact or having a rotating version of this where you're using whatever fun stuff you want to play around with. Right. Maybe keeping the Citra and the Idaho 7 and, rotating the Raquel with something else. Yeah. But yeah, I think there's a lot of things you can do with this. And could even see it being something that's there on a consistent basis. It's really neat.
Yeah. I would love to try a Wayfinder cold IPA, or someone that is sticking a little more to what they're doing. Just to see how this holds up. But as just ignoring the style and just a hoppy beer, I'm pretty happy with where we landed on it. Yeah,
it's cool. So you talked about when you took over the brewery last year, and this being the first beer that you're really, really happy with. Bring me back. So you were doing the podcast and you got the job at King Harbor, probably doing absolutely everything, washing kegs and everything you possibly could. What was it like working with Phil for those couple years? I mean, he seems like a guy who's got it.
I'm just kidding.
He seems like a guy who's got it down,
No, he's got an amazing pedigree, and I feel really lucky to to have kind of worked with him that closely for that long. I mean, if people don't know, he started at Bootleggers, went to the Siebel Academy, and was able to study in Germany for a bit, and then became like head of production, head brewer at Stone, and then went on to the brewery in Placentia and then King Harbor. So yeah, I mean, for me, that's an incredible pedigree. And like I said, he was one of our first guests on the podcast. And when I knew that I was like ready to leave Zymergy, I always have like a short list of like where I would love to go or who I would love to learn from. It was like, who do I want to learn from? Like, who's doing stuff I really, really, and like, he was actually one of like the top 3 in my head because of like where he's come from and his knowledge and everything like that. And so, I was lucky enough to like hear about that, their summer intern was about to leave, and I just like bugged the fuck out of him. Sorry, I don't know if I could cuss on the podcast.
Yeah, you can.
Okay. I just bugged him, and he finally hit me up, and just jumped in like on a canning run one day, and then he asked if I wanted to do part-time. So I was splitting time between King Harbor and Zymergy and like doing some audio restoration and then the podcast. So it felt like I had 4 different part-time jobs. And then I was there for like 2 weeks, and it was just like perfect timing every single time. But like the guy who was ahead of me gave his 2 weeks notice. So then I was no longer helping out when they needed it randomly. Now I was, okay, now you're going to be doing kegs and all this utility work and stocking the tasting rooms and delivering our beer to the distributor. I'm like, okay. And then like 2 months of that, and then someone else decided to leave. So they're like, okay, well, now we need you full time. And now you're going to be going into the cellar, and then spent like, a year in the cellar. And then the lead brewer at the time, like said he was going to leave. So then it was just Phil and myself, and I had brought actually my brother in at that point, and so he was kind of doing part-time stuff as well. So everything just kind of moved real quick. So just to give you an idea of how fast it was and how fortunate I was, I started King Harbor in 2017 and became head brewer in 2020. So my like timeline of working in the beer industry is very short, and I definitely feel that, like I feel somewhat of a fraud, especially when I hear like, Julian on your podcast who like homebrewed and was able to talk to Tommy Arthur and Vinny and all these people. And I'm like, God, that's a head brewer. Like, he's the main dude. I'm over here. Like, I worked at Zymergy and I worked at King Harbor for a couple of years, but it was great. I mean, the knowledge that he's got is vast, and I call him all the time. Like, he's still very much like a kind of like a mentor figure. And I mean, he built that brewery, so any little thing goes wrong, like I know he'll be able to like help me out and figure out something. So yeah, it was fun. Like, we would work hard, and then we all got into barbecuing. So there'd be days where we had like a smoker going while we were canning or, whatever. And, it was great. It was great working with him, and he's still close by. He still stops by randomly to pick up stuff or borrow things. So, and now that we're into golf, now we have way more to talk about. So, it was cool. It was a fun experience.
That's awesome. So, yeah. You mentioned just like a few years there, you got your brother involved, which like that hits home for me, because my brother, I work closely with him, and he was a part of Hopped LA for a little while, helped me build it from the very beginning, and may possibly be making a comeback pretty soon. We'll see.
Okay.
But yeah, that's so cool. So your brother, like,
yeah.
What was the process for getting him involved there?
So he actually helped out at Zymergy as well. I think we just needed an extra hand. I asked if he needed if he wanted some extra hours doing something. He had a great job in the aerospace industry while he was doing going to school, and Turned out he also hated his job. So minimum wage in a shitty brewery was just what he needed, just like I did. So when I left Zymergy, then he stepped up and kind of became like the new me and just took care of everything. And then when we needed help at King Harbor, I'm like, let's get you out of there. Let's, if you want, you can come over here. We need help. And yeah, he jumped on there and like worked out perfectly. Like the personalities with Phil, myself, and my brother, just it worked great. And like I'm a little more like a creative, I guess. Like I can be technical if I spend time on it. But my brother's the opposite. He's very technical, and like went into a like robotics club throughout high school and worked in aerospace, and that's a little more like Phil. So my brother and I are kind of like one really good functioning brewer who work together. And so he's been there just almost as long as I have, and stepped up. Like as I stepped up, he filled in. Mm-hmm. So he's being an idiot now and trying to better himself through higher education. So he's only like he's part-time now, but he still comes in and really like helps out and stuff. But yeah, he's been my right-hand man for everything. So it's been great to have him. Like we get along. When we fight it, like we could usually resolve it within a day. It's usually because one of us is hungry. So yeah, no, it's great. It sucks that he wants to go, learn him some, but it is what it is.
Yeah, and I'm assuming that's not to put that brain back to brewing use. Like he's gonna go back into aerospace or something.
No,
like that.
I don't. Well, so he went back for microbiology, so that can go into brewing. Yeah. But it's not going to be worth it for him and the student debt.
Yeah,
he's going to be in to come back to King Harbor because our lab is like one table, one stainless steel table. It'd be great if he, like went into like a Sierra Nevada or a Firestone or something gigantic with a real lab or whatever. So yeah, I don't know what his plan is. I know he loves the beer industry, but yeah, we just kind of go with the flow. I mean, he's still around. He's local. When I need something, he's usually available. So, but yeah, that'd be cool.
That's cool.
And in the long run, I don't know what our plan is. Our family always asks when we're opening up our own thing. I mean, yeah, wouldn't that be nice for everybody? But if every brewer and every brewery wants to open up their own thing, we'd have a brewery every other building,
Right. Yeah, that's kind of what it felt like back in like 2016, right?
Yeah. Yeah, no kidding.
It's slowed down a little bit since then, but I mean, yeah, market forces. I mean, we're coming out of an interesting time, and that's what I was thinking about back when Phil left King Harbor and you stepped up and kind of took over the brewery. We're obviously we were like right in that first like 6 months of the pandemic, right? It was like in the summer of last year. So a lot of times, like, I feel like certain, depending on your role at the brewery, some people were kind of fearful for their hours being cut or what they were able to do and what things were going to look like long term and all that kind of stuff. So where was your mindset at right before that? I mean, I'm assuming you knew well in advance of Phil's plan. Like, what can you talk me through about like how that process went?
Yeah, I mean, we weren't a special case or anything. It was hard for us too, especially with all the random mandates that we had to abide by, like selling food, but a sandwich is not a food. Like, okay, whatever. Yeah, like I said, Tiki Hut kept us alive. We were sending out a couple pallets of that every month to distro for accounts. And we're a small like production, so right before the pandemic hit is when my brother went back to school full time. So he actually like left the brewery, but like kept it open ended. If we needed help, he'd come back. So it was perfect timing because, he left and then the pandemic happened like a month later. So it was just myself and Phil. And so I've been like the lead brewer for a couple years, maybe like 2018. So I did most of the production work, and if we like double brewed, then he would like take the second brew or something like that, and he would just handle more of the like managerial office stuff, which is the stuff I hate dealing with. I'd rather like sweat all day brewing like 5 batches if I had to, rather than sit and write emails. So it was really just Phil and myself and Eric and maybe a taproom person like helping out when we needed it. So it was small. And then May comes around, and for me personally, like, yeah, we had to like really be conservative with what we brewed. So we were really only brewing like Tiki Hot and Guava, not very many 7 barrels. And then, because, you know, we had beer in the cold box when everything shut down, you know, that beer wasn't moving. So we had mountains of kegs that just weren't going anywhere. So we were brewing conservatively. But around like April, May, I had realized like I can't really move up in King Harbor anymore. Like Phil is a part owner and the head brewer. I don't think he's leaving his own brewery soon, was my thinking. So I had actually prepped my resume, got it ready to go, and like finished up my day. In my head, I had, all right, got to finish this thing, wrap that up, hot rinse the floor, and then I'm going to get out of here, read my resume and my cover letter one more time, and I'm going to send it to 2 or 3 breweries that I knew were hiring. I was taking my boots off, and Phil comes walking over, and he goes, so, what do you think about being head brewer? And I'm like, what? He's like, well, and before he said anything, I'm like, are you leaving? He's like, I just need to know if you're interested, because he was talking with the owner in the office. And that's when we found out that he was leaving. So I just thought this guy would never leave. I need to find another place because like I love working there, but you know, I wanted more opportunities. I wanted maybe a change of scenery. I just wanted to do different stuff. And that day I was going to send my resume, like he offered me the position. So that was in May, in the middle of the pandemic. And then he like his official last day was like early August. So, but he had tried to like, you know, teach me everything that I needed to do, what I was responsible for, and then was always in communication after that. So that's where we were. So I had like a little bit of a pandemic promotion. I didn't really stop going to work, and neither did Phil, like during the pandemic. Like, you know, it's a, you know, 8-minute drive to work for me. So we still had to take care of the beer. We were deemed an essential business, so we just kept rolling with it. There are a bunch of employees that depend on, you know, beer still being made so it could be sold. So it didn't really change for me that much. The weirdest thing was going to the supermarket, you know, in between my house and the brewery. But yeah, we went to work pretty much every day, and things pretty much stayed the same. Traffic was amazing. Yeah. Made a lot of trips to LA. I usually don't go above the 105, you know, if I don't have to, but went to Highland Park a few times because it took 5 minutes to get there from Torrance during the pandemic. So that was pretty great. But yeah, that was it. We just got that promotion in May, and then kind of like had it on my own in August. So it's interesting.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's like another example of impeccable timing for your career. Right? Like it just continues that trend of right place, right time, right decisions. Like it's just has somehow worked out for you, which is amazing. And I think also just, I mean, like that trajectory that like maybe you didn't plan it out, but like you were somewhat intentional about what you were doing, how you were doing it, even if you weren't conscious of it. Like, it just seemed to have worked out for you. And I think, you know, when you talk about, you know, your, you know, shorter professional brewing career compared to a lot of others out there, I think it's just like an example of, you know, the industry at large, right? Like the industry's grown a lot, and that's provided a ton of growth opportunities for people that are newer to the industry. And I think it's inspiring. Like if I wanted to be a brewer, hearing your story, I'm like, shit, man, I think that something could be possible. I just need to put the work in, not just hope it'll happen, but like proactively go out there and find opportunities and make it happen. And then hopefully with a little luck and putting yourself in the right position, you'll eventually get to that point. And, you know, I mean, I think you talking about how you were ready to go, like, start looking for another job is just, it's just a sign of that. Like, I mean, even at that point, you were lead brewer, but it had only been like, you know, a year and a half or whatever since you had been in that position. So, like, you were already kind of like foreseeing the future. And a lot of people will coast on that in that role for a couple more years than you did, or than when you were ready to kind of move on. So I think it's just a really cool story about that. Like, just, it's inspirational.
Yeah. I mean, it's, again, like a little bit of, feel a little bit of like a fraud when you hear people that are like, I was keg washer for 5 years, and then and then I was able to sweep the cellar for 3 years, and then I was able to look at the brew for another year. You know, it's just like you hear how long it takes, and I'm like, man, my story wasn't like that. But I know it wasn't just luck. Like, I always tried to show Phil and anyone else that I was there to, like, I mean, I love the job. Like, even today, you know, like, if I get comfortable, I get bored. And if I get bored, I stop caring. And that has never happened in the brewing industry. Even like with the previous brewery, like, I knew I needed to leave, but like, I never slacked at it, you know, like, even if it was already a 10 or 12 hour day and Phil was still there, I'd always ask, like, well, I finished all this. Is there anything else you need? You know, like, that's just the attitude I had. Like, I really do love this industry and the job. Like I said, I would be sweating brewing 5 batches a day if I had to. Like, I don't think it'd be a problem. It's been really fun. So I think I put in the work, and I think I showed him, like, you know, for our 5th year anniversary, whoever's idea it was to have as many small batch R&D brews as possible. So I think we did like 30, and I was responsible for almost 99% of those beers. So we brewed like 30 half barrel batches of beer that I made sure that they were done on time for our anniversary party. And it was the most stressful, but the most fun thing ever. And I think, like, doing that, and I had all these charts of, like, this beer's here, that beer's here, we need to do this, that's going to be ready here. If we don't have that ingredient here, it's not going to work. And, like, I think showing them that I could do that kind of maybe, like, led them to believe that I could probably handle more. But yeah, it can't just be all luck, because I had luck in like the entertainment industry, and I wasn't prepared for it, you know, like, toured a studio with a guy who was responsible for, like, the audio for The Office and The Simpsons. And I'm like, I made it. I'm going to do audio as a professional. And then when they finally had an opportunity, they're like, send me your reel. And I'm like, I don't have one. I made this album, you know? They're like, that's not enough. Sorry. So that really taught me, okay, you need that luck. You need that timing with that opportunity, but you better be ready when that opportunity comes, you know? So, like, I've told taproom workers, not just at King Harbor, but anyone that's asked, especially if like they heard the podcast, like, how do I, you know, get promoted or move up? And I'm like, just show whoever's in charge that you are interested, you know, like, keep asking questions. Like, you know, if you want to be a brewer, like, really get involved in home brewing, you know, because if you just say you want to, like, work in beer, but you've home brewed 1 batch and you don't have any, like, of the, you know, the coveted homebrew books that everyone's read, and, like, how are you showing anybody else that that's what you really want to do? Yeah. So I mean, and it wasn't like I really had to go out of my way to do that. I genuinely liked it, you know, like, I listened to Jamil Zainasheff and John Palmer's Brew Strong, like, all their catalog goes back to like 20 years, so you never finish their catalog of episodes, and you wanted to learn something about, like, well, why is this problem happening in my IPA? Like, there's 10 episodes they have on it. So, like, yeah, I don't think I had to try very hard. I think I just really like beer and the industry, that I just became obsessed with it.
Well, I mean, that's a winning combo right there. Love it.
Yeah.
So I want to cruise into the next beer and start kind of diving into that. So the kind of crown jewel of this episode is going to be the French Toast. But before I do, I just want to give a shout out to the Dunkel. I wish we could open them all, but we just don't have the time. Lead Sales, is that the pronunciation?
Yeah, you said it right.
Okay, cool. Munich style Dunkel with rye. Collab with Naughty Pine Brewing just opened
Yeah.
up. So how did this collab come about?
I think I ran into Brittany at one of the last LA Brewer Guild Fests. And I knew that she was studying or doing like a master's in microbiology, which my brother was just about to start. So I told him that she'd be a great, source of information for him. So like we introduced ourselves there and then didn't talk to her for a while after. I honestly don't remember like what sparked conversation again, but there was a point where I felt comfortable enough when I became head brewer to talk to her about lagers, her coming from Enegren, and like that's a brewery I really respect for their lagers, and they make amazing stuff. So yeah, she was like my contact, and she was kind enough as she got the building for Naughty Pine to meet up with me, and we actually went to Tarantula Hill, and I took my the Mexican Cerveza, which was new at the time, and I kind of wanted her feedback on it, and then Topside as well. I wanted her feedback on that, and yeah, we just started talking, going back and forth with like, how to improve this or what she does for this, and yeah, no, she's just someone that I really respect and admire. And if you hear her story, like she's done so much, and I'm pretty sure we're close to the same age. I know I've asked her, but I can't remember. Like owned a brewery in Maui and has done all these things. And I was like, man, if she could do that with a kid and going to get her like master's, and like, I should be able to do this, So yeah, she's someone I look up to and really wanted to like connect with. So yeah, we just been going back and forth. And when I knew she was opening up her brewery, I'm like, we gotta collab. And then again, for the anniversary, I thought it'd be a perfect opportunity to make some cool new stuff. And started going back and forth. It was kind of Oktoberfest season, and yeah, just started going on Dunkel path and what can we do that we like, and we both really like rye, but don't always use it because it's a pain in the ass to work with. Yeah, that's really what it was. She came down after and it was a genuine collab too. Like it was what I hoped for. I would like, this is my idea, and she would come back, well, this is my idea, and we just kind of mesh and talked for a couple hours, and yeah, it was really fun. Came over and she brewed, and I dropped her off like a case of it the day after the grand opening, and yeah, I'm pretty happy with that beer. It was fun to make.
That's awesome. Yeah, I can't wait to try it. And I think approaching Oktoberfest and thinking about beer and being able to say we're not going to do the like standard fest beer, we're not going to do a Märzen, we're going to do something a little bit different. I love that thinking. And I've heard her talk about her love for rye. And then I was doing a little like research on you and going back into like a bunch of old beers that you used to brew. And I kept seeing this hazy you used to do with rye. And I was like, yeah. He likes rye a little bit too. And so I was like, oh, that makes sense. That this ended up turning out that way. I wasn't sure like, who drove that, but it makes sense that it came from both sides.
Yeah, a lot of the hazies or IPAs in general, when I was at Zymergy, usually had a good amount of rye in them. Like one of the beers was Rye Bradbury. Was one
That's
of my
the one that I remember.
authors.
Yeah.
And, yeah, Rye of the Ancient Mariner after an Iron Maiden song. Yeah, I was obsessed with it, and then we didn't really use it when I was in King Harbor, so it's a pretty good excuse to get back into it.
Awesome. Well, that's super cool, and I can't wait to try that beer. But we are going to jump into the main beer for this show. This is the French Toast Latte. Dessert Stout with cinnamon, vanilla, coffee, maple syrup, and lactose. Collab with HiFi Espresso. And I mean, really nice looking can here. Just a beautiful label design. I love that black and gold.
Yeah, thanks.
What are we looking at? 9% on this beer. So yeah, what's the backstory? I mean, I'm sure that coming up for the anniversary, you're like, we want to do a bigger beer. We want to do something, a little bit crazy and special. And yeah, where did the idea start, and kind of how did it get to this?
Yeah, I mean, like I loved brewing big decadent stouts in the early days of brewing, and nowadays I don't necessarily like drinking them a lot, but I love brewing them and coming up with the recipes. And it's something we didn't really do much of in King Harbor, like when I started. I mean, we always had King Swirly was like our main big stout that was barrel aged. Yeah, and then we're just not one of those breweries that are like known and people don't go to for like these big stouts. And when we do darker beers, they move slower. Like in our experience, people do want more beach life beers. They want hoppy and crisp and easy drinking and fruity. So again, anniversary was a great excuse to do something a little different. So a big decadent stout that just round out the variety was something I really liked. And there was a version that I did during our 5th year anniversary. It was something similar to this that went over pretty well. So
like one of those R&D beers.
Yeah, it was like the inspiration was, the spot called the Pie Hole in like downtown LA.
I've heard of it. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, they have this one pie called, it's just a Mexican chocolate cake or Mexican chocolate pie. And I had it one day and it was just like the most delicious thing I've ever had. It's like, if you just like take the essence of walking into a bakery that just pulled out a fresh sheet of cookies and they just like pulled an espresso, just that essence of the room, like put into a cake or a pie. I wanted that in a beer. And so that was the beer I did for the anniversary. And this beer is kind of like a different version of that. So being a new head brewer, I do like collabs, whether it's to learn from someone, just, do something fun with friends, or, to like strengthen a relationship with another business. And, what I've said was the only other place besides King Harbor that you will see multiple King Harbor employees is HiFi Espresso. They've got a spot right up the street from our Riviera Village tasting room. And they got a spot closer to the brewery location in Redondo. And I go there and it's kind of like my ritual. And I'm usually picking up coffee and a bagel or something like 3 times a week there. I usually run into one of our other tasting room employees there after he goes surfing. And then when you walk in Saturday, like to a shift, usually our tasting room managers they have a HiFi cup, with them that they're drinking out of. So it's a business that we all, it's a coffee shop that we all really enjoy. And I love what they do. And they have really good quality coffee and matcha and tea and everything like that. So during the pandemic, became more friendly with the owner. And like always did that thing of like, oh yeah, we're going to have to make a beer one day. And that day came when we were planning the anniversary. So their number one selling drink is French Toast Latte. So it's kind of an easy decision to do a nice decadent stout in that style.
Yeah, this is, it sounds amazing. It sounds kind of intense, but I'm all about it. I'm down. So I was pulling up the kind of like official description just to remind myself, because I was like, I know that the coffee beans, so Nicaraguan coffee beans on this, Madagascar vanilla, obviously a very sought after ingredient for a lot of these types of beers. So not a cheap beer to make, obviously.
Right. Don't tell the owner.
So is this one still available, or is this one all gone?
It's still available.
Oh, yeah, cool.
We've got a little bit left.
Awesome. So if you're listening
again,
to
we were planning for an anniversary party, so when we postponed it, still have some left over.
Yeah. Cool glass. Thank you for the glass too.
Oh yeah, no problem.
Is this the anniversary glassware too?
Yeah, that was the anniversary glassware.
Oh my God. Are you kidding me? Yeah, you nailed from an aroma standpoint, like you nailed that imagery you're talking about, like the cookies, the coffee. One wonderful cinnamon component to the aroma.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, really nice. Everything's going together really well. And just from an appearance standpoint, it doesn't get much better. Like, it's exactly what you want to see. That's really good. Wow. I mean, it's super well balanced. That's kind of like the first thing that comes to mind is I'm not like being pulled in the coffee direction. The maple is really restrained. Vanilla is just like right where you want it to be. And even the alcohol, it feels really nice. I mean, everything just kind of feels really well balanced here. It's really cool.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, again, like for me, there's a big difference between a dessert stout and a pastry stout, and I just didn't want it to be so cloying. Like I've had too many drunken experiences with bourbon barrel aged stuff to the point where it gives me shivers if I smell it.
Yeah.
And I just didn't want like people to think they were getting diabetes by drinking one can. So like I wanted it to be drinkable.
Yeah.
I do like making those really thick, where it just like takes years to pull away from the top of the glass after you swirl it. Those are fun too. But I knew that a lot of like HiFi customers would probably be interested in this. And I kind of figured they might be new to craft beer, maybe don't know what's going on. And I didn't want to turn them off too much. So I did like a little side by side with this and their actual French Toast Latte. And I'm like, okay, I think we got it. Like there's a little bit of there's coffee in there. It kind of peeks back on the back of your palate after you've had your sip. The cinnamon is all up front. The vanilla really helps kind of like dessert it up, I guess.
Yeah.
And the maple is like, you might have to look for it a little bit. But yeah, cinnamon, coffee, and a little chocolate were kind of like the main things I wanted to get across for this.
Yeah, super cool. This is the type of beer that you would expect to drink with like a little bit more body, mouthfeel, more syrupiness. How do you make it drink so? I mean, not to say that it's thin by any means, but it's a really nice like medium body. And like you said, that was intentional. Like, how did you make that happen?
So I think I had notes on how to make like a big, bold, syrupy stout, and I just ignored some of those notes. I think if I were going to rebrew this one, I probably would like extend the boil a hair, maybe just to build it up just a tiny bit more. Excuse me. But it's trying to balance the bitterness with the hops that we used in the beginning, plus what we knew we were going to hopefully get from the coffee that we were adding. I don't know, just really starting off with a good supportive, like grist recipe, like grain bill. We didn't go too crazy. There's lactose in there, but it's not too much. I
think you nailed it. I honestly think you nailed it. Like, especially coming from the King Harbor perspective, where you do have to be mindful of, you are a beach brewery. Like, this is kind of the vibe that you do play within. And also that fact that you wanted to also cater to those HiFi coffee drinkers. I think that you got it right where it needed to be. It's awesome. I love it.
Cool. Thank you.
Yeah. I mean, it doesn't drink like it's 9%. That's for sure.
Yeah. That seems to be my MO with high alcohol stuff these days. We haven't done a lot of like double IPAs, West Coast or hazy. And we've gotten back into it recently. And that seems to be the consensus, is that they're usually pretty dangerous to drink, which I really like, because there's nothing I dislike more than a sweet malt bomb with like hot alcohol heat in like a double or a triple IPA. Yeah. I'm just not a fan of high alcohol stuff. I'm too old now. Can't handle it.
Well, I think also, like we keep coming back to like King Harbor, that beach beer type of mentality. I mean, there's some truth to that, right? I mean, you're located in Redondo Beach, like you have that waterfront tap room that is right there on the water, and Yeah, so I mean, I feel like you can't run from that, and you have to embrace it in a way that's not like one dimensional. And I think, at least from the couple things I've tried tonight, and then the little bit I've had the last time I tried your beers, it seems like you're doing that pretty well. So that's pretty cool.
Thank you.
Yeah, definitely. So, you mentioned, you took over the brewery, like you're brewing some of these beers and like making them your own. You're starting to put your own stamp on things. What is the future like? What does the future look like for you? Like, where are you trying to take it? Trying to take King Harbor? Where are you trying to take the beer?
Another good question. I don't know, like maybe as I've alluded to earlier, I normally go with the flow. So I may like subconsciously have a direction I might be pushing in, but it really is one step at a time. And that's something I really learned during all the shutdowns and pandemic, right? I mean, you could plan as much as you want, but it only takes a second for everything to go the complete opposite way. Mm-hmm. So I think in the short term, I mean, my overall goal when I stepped in was just leave this place better than I found it. And not that it was in a bad spot, but like that's just my mentality, like improve, hop contracts. Like let's try to like get more people physically in the tasting room. Let's do some more like some exciting stuff, even if it's only 7-barrel batch, let's push things in certain directions, see what we can like get away with, because maybe it'll lead to something more interesting. So it's really just small things that, like, to really put it in that nutshell, is just, I'm trying to leave it better than I found it. In every aspect that we can, trying to make things more efficient, try to make things more exciting. But I mean, in the short term, what I'm planning for is, actually what I wanted to mention is people always seem surprised when we tell them that, like, the slow season is upon us. And it's not just us, it's every brewery and most businesses too. So, if I could like get on a soapbox for a second, is just, don't forget about the businesses you care about, like as these holidays approach, because, summer is what keeps most breweries alive. So when we were all shut down a year ago, it was really hard for everybody, and so yeah, the slow season starts now, especially as it gets colder. A lot of these breweries are warehouses. I know we are, so we don't have heating or anything, so people don't want to stick around. I get it. But when you have family come over and like grab some crowlers or some cans, don't forget about your favorite breweries. Help them get through these slow times. So right now it's just, conservative brewing again is what we're entering, and but still trying to keep things a little bit exciting so that people stick around, and so that when we ramp back up, when the weather warms up, all those people are there and ready for some new cool beer. That's really all I'm planning for right now. I mean, I'd love to, fix stuff around the brewery as we do slow down. That's cool. We got a new foamer that we can clean our tanks with, so that's exciting. Gotta check the manual out real quick, and we'll start cleaning our tanks like every day. Cleaning the exterior of our tanks all the time now. But that's really it. I mean, I'd love to do more collabs with brewers that I respect and want to hang out with and learn from. But yeah, I mean, I don't know if that answered your question. I don't have like a grand plan. Really just going like a day and a week at a time right now. Who knows what the next, we'd love to throw a party. Like I said, we postponed our 6/7th year anniversary, and we usually get upwards of like 500 people that we just shut down the whole parking lot. Wow. It's a big thing. So we postponed it because we didn't know what mandates were about to happen, and we didn't want to have to deal with like whatever we had to. I mean, turned out it would have been okay, but we just didn't know like 2 months before. Yeah, it was a weird time. Yeah. So we're just like, if we want to do it, we got to do it right. We got to do it the King Harbor way. 500 plus people, live bands, food. We wanted to go all out, and we just didn't feel comfortable that we could do that. So I don't know. There's talks about doing something before our next anniversary comes around, just so we could like be around people again and show them that we could still have a good time. But yeah, for now it's just keeping things consistent and trying to keep the quality up, if not, better, and hopefully brew some more interesting, like smaller batch stuff to keep people happy for the next couple months or so.
Nice.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, I'm all about it. I mean, what you're saying about the slow season, I don't think it's super intuitive to a lot of consumers. Like really didn't think about that. And it probably is even more applicable to you guys being like we were saying, like the beach brewery, where it does get a lot colder. Cause I'm like, I feel like I drink more during the winter, but yeah, I mean, it makes sense that people aren't going out to tap rooms, and that's where most breweries are making most of their profit, are in those like direct sales at the retail side. Yeah. So yeah, I think that's a great call to action, is for everyone to pick up beer, to go out to your local brewery, check them out. King Harbor, I feel like if you haven't been there in a while, give them a look. Brand new brewer, got some new stuff coming out, some new experimentation. Different look on things. And the beers that we tried tonight: Foray, Cold IPA, French Toast Latte Stout. These aren't going to be around much longer. So if you're listening to this and it is still the month of October and maybe the beginning of November, get your ass out to Redondo Beach, pick up these beers. And if not, just check out the King Harbor Instagram, see what's new, and head out there and pick some stuff up. And again, follow John, South Bay Brew John. Yeah. Right? The old podcast Instagram turned personal.
The old podcast. Yep. Yeah, if you look deep enough, you'll see the other guys on there.
I went through it all today.
Yeah.
I saw all the old guys. Yeah.
Yeah.
How's Brent? Is he still in LA?
Yeah. Yeah, I think he's just like getting fat and happy, not like working. I think, I want him to open up something so bad, because it's just his beer knowledge and like enthusiasm for it is wasted right now. So if you're listening,
I wasn't sure
Brent,
if he was going to do something else in the industry.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, maybe he's just waiting for the right time, or maybe he's over it. I mean, who knows? I know it wasn't a great experience with the franchise, but I mean, there was probably, to be honest, the best bottle shop in my neck of the woods. Like, just so many options. You could always pull one can off a 4-pack if you wanted, and it was an amazing selection, and I really miss it a lot.
Yeah, I'm sure. Well, maybe we'll see a reincarnation or a little reunion of the podcast one of these days.
Yeah, we'll see.
I mean, now there's technology like this Riverside app that we're using. Like, it uploads everything to it downloads everything locally. So after we shut off, it'll upload everything like from your side to the cloud, so we're not operating off like the stream compression. But yeah, I mean, new technology makes it a little bit easier.
Well, Brian has decided that I was his Lost Abbey mule. He's obsessed with Tommy Arthur and Lost Abbey, so he's part of their membership, and he gets a box sent to my house almost monthly, and I take him to the brewery because I can't fit him here. And so he has to make a trip out here by car to collect his like 50 boxes of really nice Lost Abbey beer. If a Duck Duck Goose goes missing, I don't think he would notice. So if you come down to King Harbor, I could probably entertain you with some cable car. We just won't tell him.
Right. Yeah, that sounds good. Well, yeah, we'll have to do it in person. But yeah, thanks so much for joining today. It was awesome hearing your story.
Thank you for having me.
Awesome drinking these beers. I mean, congrats on everything you've been able to do.
Thank you.
I mean, that's why I was asking you about what's next, because you seem to have, you seem to always be in motion. Like there's gonna be something next. You may not know what it is yet, but you're already preparing for it, even if you don't know it. So
I function on a low level of anxiety, so I always have to keep moving.
Cool, man. Well, thanks a lot. Cheers.
Cool. Yeah, cheers. Thank you very much.
And there you have it. Thank you so much to John for joining the podcast, telling us his story. It was super interesting to hear everything that he's been up to, and also really what King Harbor has in store for us all. It is awesome to see an LA brewery 7 years strong, continuing to innovate and put out amazing product. This Dessert Stout that I'm sipping on is truly incredible. So hopefully you picked it up and you're drinking it along with us. But if not, this is your final call. Get this beer. If it's October, November time head out to King Harbor. They have 3 locations in Redondo Beach, and pick up this beer, pick up the Cold IPA, pick up any of the other stuff they're putting out, because it's really interesting. And even if King Harbor was a brewery you tried back in the day, this is a new brewery now, with a new philosophy, a new brewer, a lot of cool things going on. So I really appreciate what they're doing. And like John said, the slowdown is real. So please remember, not just King Harbor, but all your local breweries. Keep them in mind as you're thinking about going out, what you want to do, what you want to drink, where you want to spend your time and your money. They could really use it. And there's some really exciting stuff going on at King Harbor and at a lot of these LA breweries. So definitely do that. Thank you so much for listening, for watching, whatever you may be doing. We really appreciate you. Please follow along on our email newsletter. We have a lot of really cool stuff coming, including a exclusive membership program where you're going to get content, merch, and a lot of really cool community access. We'll be doing some really fun stuff, and I hope to see you guys on the other side of that. We will be announcing details on that soon, but go to hopdela.com/subscribe. Get on the email newsletter. We're putting everything there first going forward. So we'll see you guys next week. Cheers.